many people have heard of the Internet of Things and don't quite understand it. In the old days, computers were basically big white or gray boxes or servers that we're used to seeing at big companies like IBM. But we went from, sort of building-sized computers to room-sized computers to server-sized computers to laptops to iPads to iPhones. And we've seen this progression of computer chips thanks to Moore's Law that makes the technology smaller and smaller and yet more powerful. So we are connecting more and more devices to the internet. Even though when we think of computer crime, we still think of laptops and maybe now mobile phones, the fact of the matter is that we are connecting DVRs to the internet, televisions are on the internet, refrigerators, toasters, we now have toothbrushes, Fitbits, those types of workout devices that we see, this whole world of wearable computing. So more and more things are connected to the internet, as are our critical infrastructure. So bridges, tunnels, air traffic control, airplanes, automobiles, implantable medical devices. More and more stuff is going online. So when we talk about internet changing its size from a metaphoric golf ball to the sun, we're talking about the number of available connections to the internet. So the internet today uses a basic protocol, a communications protocol called Internet Protocol version 4. But we only have a fixed number of addresses. Think of like a telephone area code. When you run out of space, they need to split it or make a longer telephone number. The same thing has happened to the internet. So we've run out of space, and now they've created Internet Protocol version 6. And I won't be too technical, but Internet Protocol version 4 could support 4.5 billion simultaneous communication points. With Internet Protocol version 6, we will have 78 octillion possible devices communicating at the same time. That's the space that we've created. So 78 octillion is 78 billion, billion, billion. We will have more addresses than we could ever possibly use. It turns out that there are 10 to the 19th grains of sand on planet Earth, and with our new IP protocol, we would have enough addressable space to give every single grain of sand on planet Earth a trillion IP addresses. So why are we creating all of this space, right? Think about the number of things. We'll be able to connect an unlimited number of things, or nearly unlimited number of things, to the internet, and it will be cheap and it will be free. And there are some standards and other issues that we have to overcome. But when it's free and cheap, everything will be online. Your keychain, you will never have to worry about losing your keys again because they will be online. Elevators will be online. Pets, prisoners, every type of moving conveyance will be online. Literally chairs and tables. Well, where's the chair? Where's the table? Where's our inventory? It's all going to be online. So this is the so-called Internet of Things. And the interesting thing about it is that these devices are not just talking to human beings like you typing on your mobile phone or you typing on your iPad. These are devices that are communicating with each other. So the example that people often talk about is the milk container will know when you've taken it out of the fridge and dropped it in the rubbish bin and automatically reorder new milk for you that will be delivered probably by a drone or some other device in the future. So that's the broad thing about the Internet of Things. But the challenge about it from the security side is we can't even protect the devices that we have online today. So if you look at the number of servers and laptops and mobile phones, it's all hackable. And yet we're about to vastly, exponentially increase the size of the internet. And all of those things, the Internet of Things, is just more things to be hacked. And so the system complexities grow so great, we're finding things online that we never realized were. We've had prisons in Florida who actually had the prison doors online available to the internet, and they were hacked. And all of a sudden the prison doors are opening, right? We've had the Stuxnet attack against the Iranian nuclear power plant, which messed with their uranium centrifuges. We have human pacemakers, diabetic pumps, brain-computer interface that are all going online every year in the United States. We have 300,000 implantable medical devices that have an IP address. So your heart is now online, which means now for the very first time, the human body itself is becoming subject to cyber attacks. All our automobiles are going to be online, and they will be self-driving, which means that the opportunity to do massive denial of service attacks that won't just take down your website, but that will cause your car to crash, i.e. the operating system, and perhaps physically the vehicle itself. So the Internet of Things is just the Internet of Things to be hacked, and though we've been excellent at wiring the world, we failed to secure it, and that's something we need to give grave consideration to. So with regards to security devices moving into the digital realm, that is going to create tremendous opportunities to improve security, but it's also going to create its own risks and threats. So let's take, for example, the RFID badges that are out there. Nearly every major corporation uses them, the government uses them, Fortune 500 companies use them, and they have 100% hackability rate. So they've done studies on these devices, and 100% of the time people have been able to subvert the crypto on those chips and copy them. So when you think about the thing that we're relying upon to secure most buildings, most offices, whether it be our passports or our credit cards, that is inherently hackable. If you think about internet-enabled cameras, CCTVs and the like, there are hundreds of millions of cameras all over the planet, and you would think, well, with that we will have better security, and perhaps we will. In the old days you had to have a human being, a guard that would watch all that CCTV, but now we don't need that anymore. In fact, you can serve up using artificial intelligence and machine learning, have computer algorithms that study it. So there are actually computer algorithms that can identify a handgun or a weapon in video footage. No human eyes are necessary. The computer algorithm itself can identify it. They use something like this in New York City, where in the security ring that they have around the World Trade Center downtown, they actually have an algorithm that does bomb detection, and it was used and tested the first time 3 or 4 years ago, where a man was sitting on Wall Street. He brought his briefcase with him. He was eating his lunch, and when he got up and finished his lunch, he walked away and left his briefcase. And without any human intervention at all, the security cameras were able to process that and say, man was with briefcase, man is without briefcase, possible bomb. And it was the computer algorithm that called the bomb squad. So automated called the bomb squad and dispatched them. So that type of amazing feats of security will become possible. But the challenge with all of these cameras is overwhelmingly they're connected to the internet, and overwhelmingly they're hackable. So 30% of these systems come, particularly at consumer grade, come out of the box with no passwords whatsoever. So if anybody knows the right IP address or the right address to reach your camera, they can log in and see you at any time. And there are thousands of websites that are dedicated to exactly this, kind of this voyeuristic viewing of people inside doctors' offices and dry cleaner shops and other high street businesses, where you can, because people haven't secured the cameras, go ahead and log in. There's about another 30 or 40% of cameras that do have passwords, but those passwords are administrative passwords that are in the manuals for the camera. So if you go online and Google the name of the manufacturer, you can download a PDF of the camera operations manual and see what that administrative password is. And then there's another third that are secured. But companies from Citibank to Goldman Sachs have all had their video camera systems taken over one way or the other. And in fact, in Australia, there's a great example that I always talk about from the Crown Casino, which I think is in Melbourne. And that casino was hacked. So they had a very, very advanced computer security system that doing CCTV all over the place. A man walked in there from a foreign country. He played poker for a day and a half, and it turns out did quite well, because he walked away with 33 million Aussie dollars. And then the casino was like, what happened? They reviewed the security footage. They couldn't figure it out. Turns out his mates had hacked the casino's own security system. He had a wireless earpiece, and they were using the cameras of the casino itself, their security cameras, to read the dealer's cards, and so they could tell him when and how to bet. So yes, it has the opportunity, these internet-enabled security devices, to provide better security, but unless we ourselves lock them down, they can also be an Achilles heel that are used against us. So for the most part, security professionals have thought in 2 dimensions, right? They've thought about security in very traditional ways, but the internet, technology, 3D printing, robotics, all these new developments in science and technology means that the threats that we're facing have gone into the 3rd dimension. We now have to clearly think about 3D security threats. We'll take some examples from 3D printers. Up until now, for example, when we think of intellectual property protection, we tend to think of digital property, so film, television, software, games, and the like. And so that's been books. Anything that could be dematerialized and turned into digits has been the subject of tremendous amounts of piracy. But now, with 3D printers, we're going to face a tremendous rise in theft of intellectual property of physical objects, because you can take something like a Microsoft Kinect and use it to scan everything from a Rolex watch, Nike sneakers, or a Gucci handbag and make a perfect replica scanned via a Kinect, a couple $100 device. Now you've got a 3D blueprint that you can now print out on a 3D printer. Most people think 3D printers just print cheap plastic, but you can actually print in over 200 different substrates, everything from metal to concrete to chocolate, right? Even wood and wood pulp you can print with. So we're going to be able to create tons of physical objects. And so all of those companies that have, take for example Lego, right? You can go out and spend $100 on little chips of plastic that are colored for your children. Well, why would you need to do that anymore when you can just print your own at home? So it's really going to be quite disruptive to that. There are other physical threats. We've seen criminals use 3D printers to do 3D printing of police badges that look quite real. In Germany, it's illegal for citizens to own handcuff keys. Those are restricted to the police. But we had criminals in Germany using 3D printers to create their own keys to open up cops' handcuffs. Obviously something we'd like to avoid, and I'm sure you and your readers are well aware that they've been 3D printing weapons for several years now. At first they were of low quality, but now you can fire hundreds, if not thousands of rounds out of some of these devices. And you can print your own AK-47, AR-15, the Liberator handgun. They're all out there. When I gave my TED Talk a few years ago, I was well aware that the UK has very strict firearms laws, so I didn't bring a gun into the UK, but I did bring in a 3D printer, and I printed my firearm in the UK, and I showed it on stage, and I printed a silencer as well. So you can now do this, and so all of the security paradigms that worked well previously are now broken by these technologies. If you think about how we enforce security, we do it through borders, guards, gates, guns, customs, immigration. 200-300 years ago, right, the British Navy ruled the high seas, and they could enforce that with blockades. The United States government has had a blockade against Cuba, right, for more than 50 years. But 3D printers break blockades, right? They break embargoes, whether it be auto parts in Cuba or uranium centrifuges in Iran. You can just print what you need. So 3D printing will have a big impact on security. So another area that most folks aren't considering in the 3D realm is the issue of robotics. So up until now, our computers have been stationary. But that's going to change with the field of robotics. We've seen robotic manufacturing going back for 30 years on assembly lines, people manufacturing automobiles. And now those robots are coming into our physical space. They're coming into our homes. Things like Roomba vacuums. In Japan, they're using hundreds, if not thousands, of robots to help with elder care, to help the elderly and assist them both from a companionship perspective to physically getting around. So robots are going to be huge, and everybody will have one. Many people have their own quadcopter drones now. You can buy them at high street shops. You can buy them in the airports in Singapore and London Heathrow. They sell drones there. And so we need to consider the security implications of robotics, because robots are nothing more than computers that walk, roll, fly, and swim. And like all other computers, they too are hackable. Except when your computer today gets hacked, it's a two-dimensional threat. People move around little digits, bits and bytes, ones and zeros, so your bank balance goes down. But if people hack your robot, there could be very significant implications. Let's remember that these devices move about our physical space, and we're going to see massive increases in these types of drones. So we've already had quadcopter helicopters flying into prison. So at Her Majesty's Prison in Elmley in the United Kingdom, organized crime groups are using drones to fly drugs into the prison. And in Brazil, they're flying over the fences to bring in guns and cell phones and drugs. So the prison, security paradigm that's been here for centuries, tall fences, electrified, keep bad people in, good people out. A $200 quadcopter drone breaks that paradigm. Also in the United States, we've seen people using quadcopters to fly narcotics across the border. Recently, we had an instance where somebody used a drone to fly 12 pounds of methamphetamine over into Texas. The drone crashed because it was only meant to carry 6 pounds of methamphetamine. And the DEA has estimated that there are hundreds of drones coming across the border annually. And some of them are not the small quadcopters, they're actually much larger fixed-wing aircraft, and each one of those can carry the equivalent of $2 million worth of cocaine across the border. And the narcos that are flying them are recruiting from some of the finest colleges of aviation in Mexico. We also just had a quadcopter drone land on the front lawn of the White House. And fortunately, it was just a drone taking pictures. We've even seen people attach guns to drones, and there are YouTube videos that are showing this. So all of these robots are going to be hackable. And remember, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Pakistan, the US government and other governments around the world and the allies have used robots to shoot and kill and drop bombs. And those initial drones, like $1 billion price tag for a Global Hawk, are now coming down to the $100, $200 range, so anybody can have access to that. And we're completely unprepared. You know, it opens up a whole variety of security and privacy threats as well. Recently there was a woman in Seattle, Washington in the United States, who routinely would change in her apartment and keep the windows open because she lived on the 26th story of an apartment building. There were no other apartment buildings around her, and so she would walk around her apartment naked. Recently she looked out the window and she saw that there was a quadcopter drone flying outside her window on the 26th story, filming her in HD as she was changing. And so she called the local police, and obviously the Seattle Police Department did not have a fleet of drones that they could fly to intercept. And even if they did, under US law, there's no violation, right? Because that's open airspace. So there's nothing under current law that prevents somebody from doing that. So not only are these new technologies creating massive security risk, but they're also opening up new challenges for law, public policy, regulation, privacy. So the technology is following Moore's law and is exponential, doubling, doubling, doubling. But all our traditional legacy systems are completely analog and linear. And so we're really headed for some very interesting times ahead. We in security tend to think that we have to do it all alone. So security is the job of the security people, marketing is the function of the marketing people, finance does finance. But the security threat is going so exponentially greater day by day that we're going to need outside help. There's currently, according to Cisco, a shortage of 1 million cybersecurity professionals around the world today. And by 2020, that number is going to grow to 2 million people. So if you are a chief security officer or you are a chief information security officer, you'll never be able to battle this by yourself, right? You need to get your COO and your CEO on board. You need to get the board of directors thinking about this, and you need to get all of your employees involved, and you even need to get the general public involved, your customers, right? You need to create channels where they can tell you, oh, my credit card just got hacked, or I saw this funny thing on your website, so that you can bring in all this outside intelligence. We on the security front need to be much smarter and much more clever about crowdsourcing security and getting non-traditional players to feed into all of this. Many companies that spend tremendous sums on cybersecurity or other security tools think that they're protected, right? They think they're locked down. But the former FBI director, Robert Mueller, recently said quite famously, there's only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. And a sense of overconfidence is the enemy in a situation like this. Some statistics to keep in mind. According to a study by TrustWave Computing, the average time to detection of a cyber breach is 211 days. That means the average company that's broken into has hackers living in their system for nearly 7 months before they ever realize it. In that same study, it was shown that 75% of Fortune 500 companies in America could have their computer company networks penetrated in just under 15 minutes. 75% of the major companies in this country could be penetrated in under 15 minutes. That just is not a security threat. That's like a hot knife going through butter. It's like taking candy from a baby. The United States Secret Service, in association with Verizon Business Services, also did a study. They studied thousands of attacks. And one of the things that they noted was that cybersecurity breaches are rarely detected by the companies themselves. It turns out that the detection rate by the system administrator is only 6%. That means that 94% of the attacks against your company are picked up by other people, either because the FBI or the Australian Federal Police come knocking at your door, or because a competitor was hacked, or another fellow company was hacked, or because your customers are calling up to complain. So we are completely blind to the threat. So if you think that you're locked down, then you're definitely missing something. And for those companies that think that they're too small, one of the big fallacies in the world of cybersecurity is that people think, I don't have to worry about being hacked. Why would anybody want to come after me? We hear this repeatedly from consumers and end users. Why would anybody want to come after me? I'm just a mom or a grandmom or an uncle or a granddad, right? I've got nothing interesting or nothing to hide. And then on the small business front, they think they've got nothing to worry about. But it turns out attacks against small and medium businesses are actually growing much more quickly than they are against major corporations, because major corporations can afford to hire a 50-person security team, whereas a smaller medium business can't. The fallacy is, when you think about these cyber attacks, they are not coming against you, they are coming against everybody. People who don't follow this situation that closely think that, well, why would somebody want to come after my company? There's a fallacy in that logic. There are not people that are coming after your company. There is software that is coming after your company. The days of human hackers sitting at keyboards trying to break into your network are mostly over. Almost all of these security threats are carried out by automated tools. There is software that commits crime. It's called crimeware. We have software as a service. We now have crime as a service. You needn't be a master hacker anymore. There's literally software programs like Microsoft Office or Adobe Acrobat or Photoshop. Those all have very specific purposes. There is software that you can buy for anything from $5 to a few $1,000s that will go out there and do denial of service attacks, that will do identity theft, that will install malware and viruses on your systems. So think about a street in Sydney or Melbourne. If you had an old school burglar, right, and they wanted to break into a house, one burglar could not go and try the front door of every home. They couldn't try every garage, every back door, try to lift up every window. They might do 3, 4, 5, 10 houses a day, but they couldn't do, an entire neighborhood. But that's what's happening with this crimeware, is that these attacks have been automated. So there's software that will go out there and try to break every port. It will try every known vulnerability against your operating system, against your network, against your security systems, and it's all automated. So it means that it can scale. And these third-party, smaller companies have just as much to worry about. So the way that it works is, once this software goes out there and shakes the doors and finds an opening in a port, the next step might be to do system reconnaissance to understand your network. They will install malware on your network so that they can get in a later date. They'll put on keystroke loggers and they'll just start listening. Recently there was a hack against Target, which was a large American retailer corporation, and in that hack over 100 million accounts were compromised. 1/3 of America became a victim of criminal attack, right? Was in theory, 1/3 of America was theoretically robbed as a result of this Target hack. How did they get into Target's point of sale terminals where people swipe their credit cards? It was actually through a small third-party vendor in, I believe it was Illinois, and they did heating and air conditioning. So it turns out Target had contracted out the management of their heating and air conditioning systems, HVAC, to this small third-party contractor in the Midwest of the United States. An employee there accidentally clicked on a phishing email. He opened up the attachment, that infected his computer. Then the hackers were able to get in through the heating and air conditioning contractor, small mom and pop shop, into the Target contractor network, into the Target main network, into the Target financial network, into the Target cash register network, into their point of sale network. So Target was compromised because they didn't test and vet a small third-party company who they contracted. So 100 million people in America became victim of a crime because their air conditioning systems via a vendor were attacked via Target. I think the skill set required for successful security professionals moving forward will be quite different from what it was in the past. But I would say the key skill set that people need is curiosity. right? You need to be curious about the world around you because things are changing so rapidly, and you need to be adaptive and flexible and open to new things, and recognize that you may not have all of the answers, right? How we did security in 1970 is different. How we do it in 2000 will be different to how we do it in 2010 and 2020. So you need to think about what's coming next. Be open to learning, engage in continuing professional education, and get out there and listen to people who aren't in the security business as well, because they can also help inform you.